Wrapping up here the 2025 NFL Draft for DenverBroncos.com. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, staying alongside our lead writer, Aric DiLalla. It's over. The picks are in. We're very excited to have these guys come in for rookie minicamp, but I do have to ask, what are your first impressions of this draft class?
Yeah, I think it's a good, solid draft class for the Broncos, right? And I think people came in externally and maybe expected, hey, the Broncos are going to go running back in the first round. They're going to go tight end in the first round. I think what we learned in this draft is that you still have to go best player available and you have to follow your board, right? And it may not always line up with what the external expectations are, but the way that you become a solid football team, a good football team, and dare I say like a championship level football team year over year is by adding really good football players to your team. And I think it started on day one with Jahdae Barron in terms of, a guy that clearly the Broncos had rated really highly that fell to them at 20 and they followed their board. And now they've got a guy that can make this secondary even better, borderline elite. And I think it continued. You found a guy like R.J. Harvey at running back who can really contribute. But then as you continued on, whether it was Savion Jones at defensive end, whether it was Q Robinson, at an outside linebacker, maybe a developmental pass rusher who can give you some really good special team snaps, and really they saw some traits coming along. And then even late, whether it's a Caleb Lohner at tight end, didn't mention Pat Bryant there, a wide receiver, but I think what Sean Payton said after the draft was really, really smart and really on point, which was that, hey, you've got to find the way in the draft to get the most of what you need and also get these highly talented players. It might not always happen in the order you expect, but then they come in here and you say, okay, now it doesn't matter if you're a first round pick, if you're a seventh round pick, if you're undrafted, now it's time to compete and get to work. So I was excited about some of the proven guys the Broncos got early on. Certainly a guy like Barron he's got the tape, right? He's got the stats. He's got the awards. And then late on, day 3 in particular, I think you saw the Broncos take some, I don't want to say chances, but they saw traits. And Sean Payton said you can sometimes just pick guys that have done some stuff on day 3 and it doesn't always pan out. If you take guys with traits, it can lead you to some really special players.
Well, you look at like you said, the traits of all the guys here and the way that they're able to bring in guys that are going to align with what the locker room is about. They're building a culture here, and I feel like a lot of big things that came out from all the press conferences was the characteristics of these guys, with their work ethic, the way they get along with their teammates, kind of like that stuff you don't see on tape really played a big factor. And I feel like George Payton really leaned on that as he closed out this draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly they were on the move a lot, right? A lot of trades in this draft. I believe the Broncos only made one pick, 20th overall, where they were originally slated to pick, right? So they were moving around all weekend, but you're right, there were some commonalities. The team captain thing was big, kept coming up again and again. And then I asked Sean Payton about it after the draft, was just how much of a priority is that you have this responsibility to guys in the locker room, that you want to add guys that are high football character, that care about winning, that this matters to them. And he said that hasn't changed necessarily from previous years, but it's definitely a priority.
And after I caught up with George Payton, who mentioned that this team got better in all phases of the game, including getting a really good explosive running back who he said had one of the best visions, all the way to special teams with that punter. He's really excited to see the way this team is going to come in for rookie minicamp. He said he's excited to see them get going.
Yeah, no, this is a time where you get to work, right? And you've got the free agent class, you've got the draft class. We'll see the Broncos add some undrafted free agents, I'm sure, in the coming days here. But this team, I think Sean Payton said it well, a couple of years ago, maybe you're drafting for need more than you are now because the roster wasn't in kind of the position that it is now, and as strong as it is now. Broncos are in a better spot, and so you're able to add talented football players, and excited to see how that pans out to the field.
Well, who are you excited to see on the field?
Yeah, good question. I do think R.J. Harvey, just that speed. The Broncos, I just went through this whole thing about how you have to draft best player available and not always worry about need at that point in the draft, especially given how deep the running back class was. But I am excited to see what he looks like in that backfield, just because we know the Broncos wanted to add a runner, and they talked about Ashton Jeanty kind of being that number one back in the class, but that they needed a more realistic option for where they were picking, where they were going to be able to get somebody. And they kind of fell in love, it sounded like, with R.J. Harvey in terms of the way he plays, the home run ability, like you said, the vision. And so unfortunately for me, it's going to be many months before we see him in pads, right? And then even longer before game action, because you go through OTAs, you go through minicamp, you go through the first part of training camp. It's a long time before they put the pads on and you can actually kind of tell what you've got with a running back. But I'm excited to see that day. And then, I don't know if it's this season or this training camp or when it might be, but the tight end, Caleb Lohner, I just think that the way Sean Payton talked about him. He said, hey, if it's as good as the last one, referencing Jimmy Graham, then we'll be okay with that. I just think 4 catches, not a lot of work in college. And
4
his one
catches
season,
for 4 touchdowns.
That's right. He did make the most of his catches, but they saw traits, right? And so it might take a while, but man, if you have anyone that's anywhere near a Jimmy Graham and Antonio Gates who have come from that basketball background, it's going to be really good for the Broncos. So maybe down the line, we see something from him.
Developing these guys is really important. I feel like George Paton has a really good eye for that. Like we've mentioned it, getting those diamonds in the rough, especially as you kind of play the long game. And his picks have really panned out. We look at Jahdae Barron and what he's been able to kind of do in college and hopefully transition into the pros. He was really impressive when we spoke to him. And if you missed that interview, make sure you go to denverbroncos.com to check that out. But he just had such a passion for the game. And one of the things that George Paton mentioned was just his ability to want to learn and connect with his teammates. And I really cannot wait to see how he develops, especially learning from Pat Surtain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is going to be a guy that, talk about diamonds in the rough, he's kind of the opposite, right? Like he's this blue chip player that, as good as the Broncos defense has been, they haven't had a lot of first round picks. I believe Pat Surtain was the only one last year, right, on a defense that was 3rd in scoring defense. So you had another top end blue chip type player. Excited to see what this defense can be.
Well, Broncos country, we're really excited to see these guys in action. But if you missed anything from the draft, we have you covered. So make sure you guys visit denverbroncos.com. As always, I'm your team reporter and host, Elisa Hernandez, alongside our lead writer, Aric DiLalla.